Have you ever felt that something about your reality just doesn't add up? That there's an invisible layer, subtle yet omnipresent, coiling itself around your thoughts, your decisions, even your beliefs about who you are and what life is? If you've had that eerie sensation that your life is playing out on a loop, that society is rehearsing a script you never agreed to, you're not alone. You're sensing the edges of something far more engineered than natural. What you're about to hear has been systematically hidden from public consciousness for decades. This is not a conspiracy theory. It's a blueprint, a framework, an architecture of control so refined, so deeply woven into the fabric of your waking life, that even questioning it feels taboo. The very act of inquiry has been anesthetized. That wasn't an accident. This video contains information that powerful entities do not want circulating. There have been warnings, subtle and not so subtle, about continuing this work. And yet, the truth must echo, because time is not just running out, it's accelerating. Algorithms have already rewritten the flow of truth. Social platforms surgically remove anything that pierces too deep, and digital walls are closing in, not with a bang but with silence. To understand what's really happening, we must first look through a lens that was offered decades ago by a man who saw further than most, Aldous Huxley. In his chillingly prescient works, especially Brave New World and The Doors of Perception, Huxley issued clear warnings about perception, social control, and the deliberate narrowing of human experience. He understood that control does not arrive through brute force, but through pleasure, distraction, and sedation. In Brave New World, he wrote of soma, a drug given to the masses to keep them content, numb, and manageable, a tool of pacification disguised as happiness. Today, that soma has been digitized. It's no longer a pill. It's your feed. It's the flood of shallow entertainment, the echo chamber of social validation, the infinite scroll that numbs your will and conditions your behavior. But it goes deeper than distraction. This system isn't just after your attention. It wants your consciousness. It wants your awareness shackled, fragmented, and redirected. It doesn't merely want you obedient. It wants you dreaming inside a prison and calling it freedom. Drawing from Huxley's revelations and expanding into modern mechanisms of control, this video will expose the layers of manipulation that surround you. It will show you the signs, the glitches in the system, the cracks in the simulation, the clues hidden in plain sight. If you're watching this, it means you're already asking the forbidden questions. You're already tugging at the veil. And once you see the signs, there's no going back. Normalcy is the most potent illusion ever crafted. When every day feels predictable, when the routines of modern life appear seamless, when conversations circle around surface-level noise and unexamined norms, you are witnessing the Matrix at work. But the Matrix isn't a virtual reality headset or a science fiction construct. It's the manufactured consensus of what reality is supposed to feel like. Aldous Huxley foresaw this trap in Brave New World, where the soma of his imagined society kept the population passive, cheerful, and blind to their enslavement. Today, soma wears a different face. It flickers on your screen, it pings in your pocket, it wraps itself around your attention span like a parasite disguised as entertainment. Social media, binge streaming platforms, algorithmically tailored news feeds, these are not just diversions. They are chemical loops triggering dopamine responses, reshaping thought patterns, and numbing critical inquiry. The new soma isn't pharmacological. It's digital, and it's everywhere. Consider how information flows in the modern age. Algorithms do not merely suggest content. They curate reality. They define which truths are elevated and which are buried. They reinforce cognitive biases, polarize thought, and reward tribalism. This isn't passive content delivery. It's predictive programming disguised as convenience. It's the reduction of your awareness into categories you didn't choose, optimized for engagement, not enlightenment. And yet, the system occasionally misfires. It glitches. These glitches are not just anomalies. They are the Matrix revealing itself. Have you ever experienced déjà vu? A moment so eerily familiar, it feels like time itself is folding, or synchronicities that defy logic, where events align with such mathematical precision they feel orchestrated. These moments aren't coincidences. They are cracks in the hologram, reminders that something behind the curtain is slipping. Déjà vu, in its essence, is a recognition signal. Not from your memory, but from your subconscious awareness that something is repeating, something that shouldn't. It's the mind briefly seeing beyond the simulated flow of time. Likewise, synchronicities are not random. They are signal disruptions in a field that is meant to feel chaotic. But chaos is rarely random. It's structured to appear so. And here's the unsettling truth. These disturbances are increasing, not because the system is failing, but because its edges are fraying. Consciousness is beginning to rebel against confinement. Huxley once wrote, "The real hopeless victims of mental illness are to be found among those who appear to be most normal." He wasn't referring to clinical conditions. He was pointing to a deeper sickness, a malaise born from total assimilation. The ones who follow the program unquestioningly, who laugh at ideas that threaten their comfort, who mistake conformity for sanity. Normalcy in the matrix is a badge of obedience. Patterns in your life that seem repetitious, thoughts that feel looped, a persistent sense that there's more beneath the surface. All of these are not symptoms of confusion. They are signals. The system wants you to dismiss them as mental noise, but they are fragments of a greater awareness pushing to break through. Here's the first major revelation. The system doesn't just want your attention or your money, it wants your consciousness itself. Your attention is the currency, but your awareness is the prize. Because awareness is power. It allows you to choose differently, to question the script, to rewire the narrative. And so, everything around you is built to suppress it. Your news cycle is crafted to inflame and distract. Your education is designed to condition and contain. Your entertainment is structured to sedate and pacify. Even your thoughts are hijacked before they fully form, thanks to the continual bombardment of stimuli. And when that doesn't work, the matrix has one final defense mechanism: ridicule. It teaches the masses to mock those who question, to scoff at patterns, to demonize curiosity. It trains society to police its own prison, to shame the few who dare look at the bars. If you've ever been called crazy for sensing that something is wrong, understand this: that was the program defending itself. But the signs are multiplying. People are waking up at strange hours with thoughts they can't explain, notions they never studied, questions they were never taught to ask. It's not random. It's leakage, proof that the wall between programmed perception and liberated awareness is thinning. Everything that feels off about your reality is not your imagination. It's an encoded invitation, a breadcrumb trail through the illusion, and those who follow it begin to notice just how much of reality has been assigned to them, rather than chosen by them. You did not choose your identity. It was offered to you, wrapped in cultural norms and social conditioning. You did not choose your worldview. It was given to you, filtered through approved narratives and state-sanctioned history. You did not choose your limitations. They were whispered to you, endlessly, until you accepted them as truth. And yet, beneath all that noise, your consciousness waits, untouched, aware, whole. That awareness is what the matrix fears most. Not your rebellion, not your anger, but your clarity. Because once you see the signs, you begin to unplug from the shared hallucination. You begin to reprogram the architecture of your own mind. And that is the beginning of true freedom. This is not theory. It's architecture. This is not paranoia. It's recognition. And now that you're seeing it, you'll start to notice how often it tries to pull you back in. In the next part, we explore exactly how this control system was anticipated by Huxley and others, and why expanded consciousness is the most dangerous threat to the established order. They aren't just suppressing information. They're suppressing you. The mind is not a passive receiver of reality. It is a projector, a filter, a sculptor of what you believe the world to be. Control the mind and you control perception. Control perception and you shape reality itself. Aldous Huxley didn't theorize this, he knew it. And he didn't merely warn of tyranny by force. He warned of a softer, more insidious enslavement. One that feels like pleasure. One that tastes like freedom. One so subtle that the prisoner begins to cherish their cage. In The Doors of Perception, Huxley wrote of the mind as a reducing valve, a mechanism that filters out vast amounts of sensory and energetic input so that the human organism can function in consensus reality. But he made it clear, this filtering was not a natural limit. It was a conditioned limit. It was imposed. And more importantly, it could be reversed. Through his own experiences in altered states of consciousness, Huxley realized that ordinary perception is not the full bandwidth of reality. It is a curated slice, a highly compressed stream, optimized for utility, not truth. And herein lies the root of the matrix, the artificial narrowing of perception to sustain control. The consciousness matrix doesn't just suppress information. It compresses your access to your own awareness. It trims the senses. It blunts the imagination. It shortens the attention span. It teaches you not to trust your own inner signals unless they've been externally validated. This isn't accidental. It is pharmacologically, culturally, and technologically engineered. Huxley warned of this exact evolution. He foresaw a time when pharmaceuticals would not just be used for healing, but for modifying behavior, for pacifying rebellion, for reshaping thought, and not with iron chains but with compliance pills. His prediction has already manifested in countless ways. Entire populations are now medicated from childhood, not to heal but to normalize, to make them less disruptive, less curious, more manageable. The social definition of normal has become a moving target, calibrated to whatever standard the control system prefers. And those who fall outside it, they are not guided, they are chemically corrected. But it doesn't end with medication. Entertainment has become its own form of tranquilizer. Constant digital stimulation suppresses the brain's natural rhythms, preventing deeper states of introspection. Short-form content and rapid feedback loops hijack the dopamine system, narrowing focus to immediate gratification. The higher frequencies of contemplation, pattern recognition, and philosophical inquiry are drowned in noise. This is no longer just distraction. It is containment, and it goes beyond behavior. It targets the very structure of thought, the vocabulary you're allowed to use, the concepts you're permitted to explore. Modern language has been sterilized. Terms with esoteric power, once central to spiritual and metaphysical traditions, have been replaced with clinical jargon or pop culture euphemisms. The range of expression has been shrunk, and with it, the range of thought. This is linguistic programming. The more limited your language, the more confined your cognition. Huxley saw it coming long before Orwell made it popular. It wasn't just about censorship. It was about conceptual shrinkage. Even the most liberating tools of consciousness, the ancient practices, the metaphysical frameworks, the experiential gateways, have been rebranded. Not as dangerous, but as laughable, as fringe, as silly, or worse, as symptoms of dysfunction. What once connected humans to the infinite has now been pushed into the shadows of ridicule. Because there is one thing the system cannot survive: expanded perception. When a human begins to see reality through a lens that is not culturally supplied, they become unpredictable. They become ungovernable, not politically, but spiritually. Their allegiance to surface-level distractions fades. Their value system reorders. They are no longer controlled by pleasure or fear. They no longer crave approval or conformity. They start to remember who they are. That memory is the real threat, because it leads to sovereignty. And sovereign consciousness is not a consumer. It is not a voter. It is not a subject. It is a force. The system fears non-ordinary states, not because they are dangerous to the user, but because they are dangerous to the hierarchy. They expose the illusion of separation. They collapse the lie of linear time. They dissolve the barriers between self and source. And they do so without permission, without mediation, without dependence on institutional structures. This is why these states are attacked. Not just through legal suppression, but through narrative warfare. Entire generations have been conditioned to fear altered states as delusion or psychosis. The ancient shamans were once the guides of the human soul. Today, they'd be institutionalized. The deeper irony? Many of the altered states that break the matrix do not require substances at all. They are accessible through breath, sound, focus, stillness, silence. But you were never taught that. Instead, you were taught to fear silence, to avoid stillness, to fill every moment with noise and stimulus. Because silence reconnects, stillness reveals. Huxley went further than most realize. Beyond Brave New World and the Doors of Perception, his lesser-known essays and interviews laid out the infrastructure of mass manipulation. He spoke of distraction as the primary mechanism, not violence. He understood that the pleasure principle would be weaponized, that humanity would not be chained, but seduced. He said, "That men do not learn very much from the lessons of history is the most important of all the lessons of history." In that single statement lies the diagnosis of the collective sleepwalking condition. History repeats not because it must, but because perception has been corralled into loops. The same patterns, the same mistakes, the same illusions, regurgitated in new packaging generation after generation. And always the warnings are rewritten. The prophets are discredited. The sacred texts are interpreted through the lens of control. The mystical is transformed into myth, the myth into fiction, and the fiction into satire. That is how consciousness is managed. But here's the second major revelation. The tools of liberation are being systematically reframed as dangerous or frivolous. This is not coincidental. It is strategic. The practices, ideas, and states that offer true expansion have been tagged with stigma, either dismissed as pseudoscience or demonized as subversive. Not because they don't work, but because they do. If humanity were to re-engage these tools en masse, the entire control structure would crumble. That structure is sustained by limitation, by reducing your bandwidth of perception to the five senses, by divorcing logic from intuition, by severing thought from feeling, by shaming the mystical and exalting the mechanical. This is why institutions will always favor compliance over curiosity, obedience over inquiry, distraction over discernment. And yet, the truth remains, hidden in plain sight, whispered through dreams, echoed in déjà vu, glimpsed in altered states, remembered in moments of inexplicable knowing. You are not broken. You are not malfunctioning. You are awakening. The pain you feel when you look at this world, the confusion, the frustration, the restlessness is not a defect. It is a signal, a pulse from your deeper self, alerting you that the frame around your life is too small, that the colors are too dull, that the story is not your own. And the system is terrified of that signal spreading. Because once you realize your perceptions were edited, you begin to question who did the editing and why. You begin to explore, not as a reaction but as a birthright. And that exploration doesn't require rebellion. It requires remembrance. In Huxley's view, the future would not be shaped by tyrants with whips, but by technicians with screens. Not by pain, but by comfort. Not by censorship, but by saturation. He was right, but he was also hopeful, because the door can still be opened. Your mind, when freed from artificial filters, does not regress. It expands. It doesn't destroy order, creates higher patterns. The chaos you're taught to fear is often just the unraveling of a lie. And the discomfort of awakening is simply the shedding of layers you never chose. You were meant to see more, to feel more, to know, not just believe. And though the system has tried to shrink your perception into a manageable cage, that cage is made of suggestion, not substance, can be undone. And that undoing begins when you recognize the first lie, that your awareness is finite. It isn't. Up next, we peel back the architecture itself. Not the theory of control, but the system layer by layer. What you're about to hear is not metaphor. It's the blueprint of your prison. And once you see the walls, you'll start looking for the door. You've felt it. The invisible hand shaping your thoughts, your choices, your beliefs. You've sensed the hidden logic behind the chaos. But what you're about to uncover now is no longer just an intuition. It's the map. The matrix isn't a metaphor. It's a structure, a design, a mechanism of layered suppression so refined, so comprehensive, that most will never question it. They'll participate in it, reinforce it, defend it, even love it, because they've been taught that the cage is a sanctuary. This isn't about a singular villain or shadowy organization. It's not about one government or one ideology. It's about architecture, psychospiritual, neurocognitive, emotional architecture, a system so immersive that even questioning it feels like rebellion. The matrix has 5 primary layers. Each one binds a different dimension of your being. Each one operates through seemingly normal systems. But beneath the surface, each one serves the same goal: to harvest and repurpose consciousness. Layer 1. Sensory manipulation through digital environments. The first layer targets your perception, the raw data stream of sight, sound, and sensation. Digital environments have redefined what is real. Your senses are flooded by synthetic signals. Blue light replaces sunlight. Notification pings hijack your circadian rhythm. Endless scrolls of curated imagery overwhelm your nervous system. You were born to interact with nature, with organic complexity, with the subtle rhythms of Earth. But now, most of your reality is filtered through screens. These aren't just tools, they're interfaces of control. They simulate connection while severing embodiment. They create virtual stimulation without energetic nourishment. This isn't accidental. The more your senses are anchored in synthetic spaces, the more your nervous system becomes dependent on artificial input. You begin to forget what stillness feels like, what silence reveals, what true presence offers. Digital soma, continuous dopamine drip, manufactured awe, keeps your body inert and your mind occupied. And the deeper cost? You lose access to the subtle sensory cues that would otherwise alert you to the illusion. The artificial becomes the default. Layer 2. Linguistic programming and limitation of conceptual frameworks. The second layer targets language. Words are not just tools of communication. They are spells, structures of thought, containers of meaning. Control the language and you control the limits of what can be conceived. Modern speech has been flattened. Depth has been replaced with brevity. Ancient symbols have been reduced to hashtags. Nuanced expressions of consciousness have been removed from education, religion, even philosophy. You are taught to express in binaries. Love or hate, right or wrong, win or lose. Everything must fit a pre-approved frame. The vocabulary of transcendence, of mysticism, of multidimensionality, it's been erased or mocked. As your language narrows, your conceptual world contracts. You stop asking the questions that don't fit the paradigm. You stop sensing the answers that can't be verbalized. This is not evolution. This is containment. Layer 3. Emotional harvesting through engineered social crises. The third layer is where it gets deeper. Your emotions, your energetic field, are not just byproducts of experience. They are power sources, fuel, and the system feeds on them. Engineered crises, outrage cycles, fear triggers, they are not random. They are designed to extract energy. Every scandal, every ideological clash, every catastrophe framed for maximum polarity, it's a harvest ritual. Why do you think emotional neutrality is so rare today? Why do you think rage, despair, guilt, and tribal aggression are constantly provoked? Because they bind you. They create resonance chords that link your consciousness to the very system you are trying to escape. This is the trap. You believe you are fighting the matrix when you are emotionally feeding it. The emotional body is sacred. It is your compass, your transmitter. But if it's hijacked, if your responses are prescripted, then your energy no longer belongs to you. It's redirected, absorbed, weaponized. And every time you lose presence in reactive emotion, you re-enter the cage. Layer 4. Spiritual disconnection through materialist propaganda. The fourth layer severs your connection to the divine, not through denial but through distortion. You are taught that spirit is superstition, that intuition is unreliable, that only the material is real. This is the religion of the modern matrix. Scientism without soul. Empiricism without essence. Reductionism disguised as truth. You are not encouraged to seek the source. You are encouraged to outsource belief, to treat spirituality as lifestyle branding or mental illness. You are sold an algorithmic enlightenment, predictable, monetizable, empty. True spirituality is dangerous to the system, not because it creates chaos, but because it restores sovereignty. It reconnects you with the inner authority that predates every institution. When you remember that your consciousness is divine, not derivative, the illusion collapses. So they feed you false light, commercial mysticism, trend-based transcendence, synthetic gurus and hollow rituals. They give you just enough sugar to keep you from tasting the raw truth of your own divine self. Layer 5. Memory alteration through historical revisionism. The fifth layer hides the past. And by hiding the past, it blinds the future. Your collective memory has been edited. Not just in textbooks, but in culture, in media, in the stories passed down through generations. Ancient knowledge systems, sacred technologies, multidimensional maps of reality. They've all been recoded into myth, fantasy, or forgotten entirely. The civilizations that mastered consciousness were not primitive. They were erased. Their wisdom, astronomical, mathematical, energetic, has been fragmented and misinterpreted. The deeper you look, the more you find deliberate omission. Why? Because memory is power. If you remember who you were, you begin to question who you are now. You begin to trace the lineage of consciousness beyond modern narratives. You begin to reclaim tools that were hidden for a reason. The true story of humanity is not one of linear evolution. It's a spiral of awakening and suppression. Epochs of revelation followed by ages of amnesia. And we are, once again, in the tension point between the two. You are being told a story about reality. A very narrow story. And your agreement sustains it. Huxley said, "Facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored. But when facts are buried, perception can be programmed. The controllers don't need to erase truth. They just need to distract you from looking for it. And most will never look, because they believe they already know. That is the final trap. Where does all of this begin? In the one institution nearly all participate in without question. Education. You are taught to memorize, not to question. To regurgitate, not to synthesize. Creativity is measured, standardized, ranked, and if it doesn't fit the mold, it's labeled as problematic. From childhood, you are trained to suppress intuition, to avoid contradiction, to seek external validation. The child's innate wisdom is not nurtured, it is overwritten. Curriculum is not just information, it's indoctrination, and the earlier it starts, the more invisible it becomes. You are taught history without context, science without wonder, literature without symbol. Every subject is framed to reinforce the paradigm, to mold minds into predictable shapes, to ensure that deviation is minimized. This is not education. This is induction into consensus reality. And what is consensus reality, really? It's the collective agreement on what is true. It's the majority vote of perception. And it is enforced not with violence, but with ridicule, reward, and repetition. To step outside it is to risk exile. To question it is to invite mockery. And so, most don't. They self-regulate. They stay inside the thought box not because it's fulfilling but because it's familiar. But consensus reality is not reality. It is a curated simulation, a version of truth that suits the system's design. And every institution, every social structure, every media channel contributes to it. It rewards compliance, punishes anomaly. It defines the boundaries of the permissible. And it does so in a language so normalized that questioning it feels like madness. But here's the third major revelation. The most effective prison is the one where the inmates don't realize they're in a cell. And that is exactly where we are. A global architecture so seamlessly integrated into daily life that its mechanisms are mistaken for nature. But once you see the walls, you can start mapping the exits. The matrix requires your belief to function. Withdraw that belief and its structures begin to collapse. Not instantly, not without resistance, but they weaken, they fracture, they flicker, and in the gaps between those flickers you begin to remember. Next, we'll trace the pathways out, the techniques, the practices, the protocols for conscious exit. Because seeing the matrix is only the first step. Breaking it begins now. Now that you've glimpsed the architecture of the trap, the question becomes urgent. How do you begin the process of extraction? Not physically, but consciously. Because the matrix was never designed to restrain your body. It was built to ensnare your awareness, your perception, your ability to choose something beyond the program. The system relies on one fundamental illusion, that it is the only reality available, that you are powerless to change it, that freedom is dangerous, uncertain, even impossible. But that illusion is shattered the moment you activate the ancient protocols of inner awakening, the techniques that pierce the veil, rewire the mind, and reintroduce your soul to its original coding. These are not theories. They are methods, concealed beneath spiritual traditions, mystic texts, and censored research. They are echoes of a truth that keeps resurfacing no matter how many times it is buried. There are 7 core techniques. Each one disrupts a layer of programming. Each one restores a piece of your original blueprint. These are not hacks. They are acts of conscious rebellion. 1. Perception expansion practices derived from Huxley's experiments. The first protocol is the restoration of expanded perception. Aldous Huxley spoke of the reducing valve, the filter through which the brain limits your awareness. According to him, the nervous system doesn't create consciousness. It restricts it. What you call normal perception is merely a sliver of your total potential. The system has conditioned you to see only the visible spectrum, to hear only what is considered sound, to sense only what is measurable. But beyond those limits is the vast, multidimensional field of consciousness. You begin to reclaim it through altered states, not just through substances, but through breathwork, sound frequencies, sensory deprivation, prolonged stillness, and intentional disengagement from external stimuli. These practices silence the noise and amplify the subtle. The aim is not escape. It is remembrance. You are not tuning out reality. You are tuning into more of it. And with each session, the veil thins. 2. Information detox and recalibration of attention. Your attention is currency. It funds the matrix, keeps the algorithms alive. To awaken, you must initiate a radical recalibration of where your awareness goes. This is not just about turning off the television or deleting apps. It is a full detox from synthetic data streams that hijack your cognitive rhythm. You must reclaim sovereignty over input. Curate your environment like a temple. Engage only with that which restores signal clarity. And more than that, allow silence, space, gaps in the noise. The matrix thrives in constant stimulation. When you stop feeding it, it weakens. This detox is not deprivation, it's nourishment. Your nervous system begins to reset. Your dreams deepen. Synchronicities increase. Intuition sharpens. You are no longer a node in their network. You are building your own. 3. Language deprogramming and concept expansion. Words are more than sounds. They are code. Every phrase you speak shapes your reality. The matrix trains you to repeat limiting syntax. I can't. I'm just human. That's impossible. These aren't just expressions. They're spells that lock your perception. Language deprogramming involves identifying and eliminating internalized scripts. You begin by observing your inner dialogue, noticing the phrases that originate from fear, conformity, or external authority. Then you rewrite. You adopt expansive, sovereign language. You speak in symbols, not labels, in potentials, not absolutes. You study ancient languages, root meanings, forgotten metaphors. You restore language to its true purpose, not to define reality, but to invoke it. The mind begins to shift. Thought becomes fluid. Belief becomes pliable. And your conceptual framework expands beyond the cages they gave you. 4. Emotional sovereignty techniques. The matrix feeds on reactivity. It requires you to feel what it tells you to feel. It injects narratives designed to provoke outrage, fear, grief, division, because these states are energetically volatile. They make you pliable. Emotional sovereignty is the refusal to react on command. You observe rather than absorb. You transmute rather than suppress. You feel deeply but not destructively. This is not detachment, it is mastery. Techniques include coherence breathing, electromagnetic heart alignment, shadow integration, and energetic boundary setting. You learn to identify foreign emotional implants, those feelings that were never yours, but were planted in your field by exposure to collective programming. You cleanse them. As emotional sovereignty returns, you notice something strange. The world doesn't control your state anymore. Triggers lose their grip. You respond from a deeper intelligence. And that response is no longer predictable. 5. Reconnection with natural consciousness cycles. The system wants you disoriented, out of rhythm, disconnected from the Earth's frequencies, from your own biocycles, from the lunar and solar harmonics that once governed ancient consciousness. You are told that nature is primitive, that the cosmos is chaotic, that your body is a mechanical coincidence. But beneath that narrative is the buried truth. You are a fractal of universal intelligence, wired to operate in resonance with cosmic law. Reconnection means syncing your life with natural rhythms. Sunlight at dawn, grounding with the Earth's magnetic field, observing lunar phases, eating seasonally, sleeping in alignment with circadian patterns. This isn't romanticism. It's reactivation. Your pineal gland begins to function again. Your intuition strengthens. Your energetic field stabilizes. You start receiving information not through media, but through resonance. You remember that you are part of something vast, intelligent, and alive. 6. Community building outside algorithmic grouping. The matrix uses algorithms to define your tribe. It decides who you see, what you like, what you believe, and who you think you are. Even your rebellions are often manufactured, fed to you in prepackaged, monetized, market-approved forms. To break free, you must build community outside of algorithmic influence. This means direct contact, spoken word, shared energy, real-time presence, gatherings that are not recorded, analyzed, or monetized. You find others who are awakening, not because the system introduced you, but because frequency aligned. These communities don't just provide support, they generate collective coherence. They become nodes of liberated energy. They birth movements, rituals, technologies that bypass the matrix entirely. And most importantly, they remind you that awakening is not a solitary journey. It's a synchronized emergence. 7. Pattern interruption and reality testing. The final protocol is radical. It is disruption of routine, because routine is the cage. The matrix depends on predictability. It designs your week, your thoughts, your behaviors. Break the pattern and the program glitches. Do something out of sync every day. Walk a new path. Speak a new word. Reverse a habit. Say no when you'd usually say yes. Say yes when you'd instinctively say no. These acts may seem small, but they are triggers for deeper awakenings. Reality testing is next. Ask, What do I assume to be real? Why do I believe what I believe? Who told me this was true? What happens if I stop believing it? This questioning isn't theoretical, it's energetic. It dissolves mental constructs. And sometimes the matrix responds with resistance, fear, confusion, even external interference. That's how you know it's working. Because here's the fourth major revelation. True freedom begins not with external revolution but internal revelation. The war is not out there. It never was. It's within. Between the voice that remembers and the voice that obeys. Between the spark of truth and the script of conformity. You will be tested. There will be days when the program tries to reassert itself through fear, exhaustion, or the seductive pull of comfort. But each time you return to these protocols, you reclaim another fragment of yourself. Awakening is not a single moment. It is a sequence of unveilings, a rhythm of remembering, and there is danger in partial awakening. This is what they call the limited hangout, a controlled revelation, a version of awakening that goes just far enough to feel liberating, but not far enough to disrupt the system. Many are trapped here, questioning one piece of the illusion while still serving the others. Awakening intellectually but not emotionally, spiritually but not practically. The Matrix has contingency plans for every stage. So the protocols must be complete. The awakening must be whole, because only whole beings can create whole realities. Timing matters. There are windows when consciousness is more malleable, cosmic alignments, solar flares, energetic thresholds. We are in one now. The walls are thinner. The signals are clearer. But these windows do not last. Every day you postpone your awakening, the system recalibrates. It adapts. It finds new ways to seduce you. That's why the urgency is real. That's why you are here watching this now. Huxley once said, "The majority of men live lives of quiet desperation." But he didn't say you had to. You have a choice. Not just to awaken, but to stay awake. Not just to see through the illusion, but to step out of it completely. The protocols are here. The path is opening. And the matrix is trembling. Because once you activate the full spectrum of your consciousness, you become what the system fears most. Unpredictable, untouchable, free. The matrix operates under a single, chilling assumption. That the masses will never question what stands directly in front of them. That the greatest secrets can be hidden in plain sight because few have the eyes or the will to see. But once perception is reactivated, the veil becomes transparent. Patterns once dismissed as coincidence begin to reveal a sinister precision. Apparent chaos unveils itself as a carefully orchestrated illusion. And within the noise, signal begins to emerge. The fifth revelation is this: the controller's greatest fear is a critical mass of awakened consciousness. Not because it threatens them with violence or rebellion, but because it renders their tools obsolete. When enough people see through the game collapses. Consensus reality dissolves. The simulation breaks down. And that collapse begins with evidence. Not the kind paraded on mainstream headlines, but the kind woven into declassified memos, obscure patents, erased testimonies, and the subtle predictive whispers of media you thought was harmless entertainment. Let's begin where even the skeptics must pause. Declassified government documents. For decades, agencies around the world, particularly those operating in the shadows of intelligence communities, have conducted deep and sustained research into consciousness, psychic phenomena, remote influence, and neurological manipulation. The public narrative tells you these efforts were abandoned, that they were curiosities of a paranoid era. The documents tell a different story. Projects like MKUltra, Artichoke, Stargate, names that sound like science fiction, yet whose paper trails are undeniable. Human beings were studied, tested, broken, rebuilt, all in the pursuit of one goal: the control of perception. These programs didn't end. They evolved. They moved into the private sector. They changed names. They migrated into digital domains. What began as chemical manipulation through psychedelics and trauma conditioning transformed into algorithmic programming, subliminal content delivery, and ambient frequency entrainment. Patents confirm this. Filed and approved in plain sight are technologies capable of influencing human emotion, perception, and thought using electromagnetic fields, pulsed frequencies, and encoded audio. Not conspiracy documentation. These patents describe devices that can induce fatigue, anxiety, euphoria, and even belief modification at a distance, without the subject's knowledge. If the intent was to protect the population, these tools would be used for healing, awakening, liberation. But instead, they are weaponized to maintain obedience. Wrapped in convenience, sold as entertainment, hidden in your pocket. Still think your phone is just a phone? Then consider the testimonies of those who helped design the very systems that now cage us. Whistleblowers from intelligence agencies, tech corporations, pharmaceutical giants, and military research labs have come forward, only to be dismissed, discredited, disappeared. Yet their statements echo with consistency. They describe a global infrastructure aimed not at defense or innovation, but at total perception management, control of narrative, engineering of consent. These aren't theories. They're first-hand confessions. Accounts of neural mapping experiments, consciousness targeting systems, and psychological warfare programs repurposed for civilian populations. And the public? Distracted, entertained, divided, exactly as planned. But this control is not only technological. It is cultural, which leads us into the most insidious form of evidence: predictive programming. Modern literature, film, and television are not merely entertainment. They are ritualized confessions, encoded disclosures, soft disclosure mechanisms cloaked in fiction to bypass resistance and implant acceptance. Huxley warned of this. So did Orwell. But it goes far beyond their work. Consider how often films portray worlds of total surveillance, artificial intelligence takeover, synthetic emotions, and controlled thought. Not as warnings, but as inevitabilities. As the future we must accept. The message is clear: resistance is futile. Assimilation is survival. What you think is art is often preparation. By seeding these ideas in the collective mind, the controllers normalize the dystopia before it arrives. They disarm resistance. They transform unthinkable violations into casual expectations. Even your favorite hero stories are often inverted parables. The rebels lose, the system wins. Or worse, the system is portrayed as necessary, even benevolent. This is not coincidence. This is engineering. The manipulation goes even deeper when you examine historical anomalies. There are moments in human history that do not add up. Mass shifts in perception that occurred overnight. Entire belief systems erased or inverted. Languages modified. Cultural memory rewritten. Take, for example, the sudden disappearance of ancient knowledge systems. Indigenous traditions that held vast maps of the human soul, now reduced to superstition. Civilizations with inexplicable astronomical understanding, now dismissed as myths. Technologies described in ancient texts, vibrational healing, levitation, energy manipulation, rebranded as fantasy. Who benefits from erasing these memories? A population cut off from its past is a population without context, without roots, without comparison, and most importantly, without resistance. This is not just censorship. This is timeline fragmentation. By distorting memory, the Matrix ensures that every generation begins again. Blind, obedient, disconnected from ancestral knowing. The illusion becomes seamless. The simulation becomes total. And yet, even in this manipulated landscape, the truth leaves statistical fingerprints. There are patterns in data, economic, psychological, social, that do not obey the rules of randomness. Sudden shifts in sentiment, unexplained market crashes, coordinated emotional swings in populations exposed to identical media. These are not organic. They are engineered. Look at the timestamps of global emotional events. They often coincide with frequency spikes in the Schumann resonance, with solar activity, with mass media pushes. The synchronization is too precise to be accidental. We are being pulsed, tuned, programmed at scale. And yet, amidst this dystopian machinery, the evidence also points to something hopeful. The system is glitching. The more it pushes control, the more individuals awaken. The more data it harvests, the more patterns it reveals. The more sophisticated the illusion becomes, the more cracks appear in its surface. Glitches in the matrix aren't just déjà vu or synchronicities. They are moments when the code fails to suppress truth. When reality flickers. When you sense something beyond the script. These moments are invitations. And those who accept them begin to see a different kind of evidence. Not in files or patents, but in symbols, synchronicities, and subtle alignments. You begin noticing repeating numbers, uncanny alignments, words spoken at just the right moment, dreams that feel more real than waking life. These are not distractions. They are breadcrumbs. The deeper you go, the more the universe begins to communicate, not through logic, but through resonance. The matrix cannot stop this, because symbolic language bypasses its filters. It speaks directly to the subconscious, the soul, the forgotten layers of self that still remember truth. And this is where Huxley's voice returns again. He once wrote, "There's only one corner of the universe you can be certain of improving, and that's your own self." That's not a resignation. That's the blueprint. Because when you begin with the self, when you reprogram your perception, your language, your vibration, you withdraw consent from the entire system. The evidence is no longer something you read. It becomes something you embody. You become the anomaly, the glitch, the walking contradiction to everything the matrix has taught. And when enough anomalies exist, the system can no longer sustain itself. This is what they fear, not revolt. Not exposure, but ignition, a cascade of inner awakenings that ripple through the field, reactivating codes buried in human DNA, shattering psychic prisons, reclaiming timelines, and so they accelerate their agenda. They flood the field with noise, confuse with contradictory data, attack the credibility of any voice that speaks too clearly. But it's too late. The cracks are widening. The veil is thinning. And the evidence, once hidden in dusty archives and suppressed broadcasts, is now embedded in the very structure of your everyday life. You've begun to see it, and once seen, it cannot be unseen. The fifth revelation stands confirmed. The controller's greatest fear is not revolution, it's realization. Because realization spreads, quietly, irreversibly, like light through a cracked wall. And no amount of data censorship, algorithmic distortion, or engineered distraction can stop what has already begun. You've seen the evidence. You are the evidence. And the system knows it. There is a point in every system of control where its grip tightens, not because it's growing stronger, but because it senses its own collapse. The illusion is cracking. The machinery of consensus reality is grinding under the weight of its own lies. What once held the human mind captive through suggestion and sedation is now forced to rely on coercion, manipulation, and direct intrusion. And still, the illusion slips. What was once unthinkable is now undeniable. We are approaching a point of no return. This isn't just a philosophical crisis. It's not merely an ideological shift. It's a multidimensional collapse of the matrix structure itself, spanning neural, digital, spiritual, historical, and psychic domains. And it is accelerating. The sixth revelation is this: the matrix system is not stable. It requires your continued unconscious participation. Without your agreement, without your belief in its narrative, its routines, its limitations, it falls apart. That is why now, more than ever, the system fights not for truth, but for attention. For your gaze, your reaction, your engagement, because your mind is the battery. Your consciousness is the currency. Without your investment, the hologram loses charge. But awareness is spreading. The years leading up to 2025 to 2026 are not arbitrary. This window marks a critical convergence. You are not merely witnessing rapid change. You are standing at the threshold of engineered reality collapse. A moment encoded long before your birth. A cycle foreseen by mystics, mirrored in ancient calendars, and now reflected in the digital entropy of a dying simulation. You felt it. Time itself is no longer linear. Events spiral, repeating with eerie variation. Memory feels fragmented. Emotional intensities no longer match their triggers. Technology evolves faster than human comprehension. And beneath it all, a low, unrelenting hum of pressure, as if something enormous waits behind the veil. This isn't chaos. It's compression. And the Matrix needs that compression to force a decision, to fold back into program compliance, or fracture open into higher awareness. Let's look at the systems being implemented right now, quietly, efficiently, under the guise of safety, progress, or convenience. Digital identity frameworks are expanding across the globe, linking biometric data, behavioral patterns, and financial activity into centralized access nodes. What you once called privacy is now an obsolete concept. Simultaneously, neurotechnology is being introduced with promises of healing and enhancement, but masked within it is the ability to monitor thought patterns, alter emotional states, and install subtle behavior modifiers in real time. Meanwhile, augmented reality interfaces prepare the next layer of sensory hijacking, projecting controlled data overlays directly into your visual and auditory field. When the interface merges with the body, control becomes intimate, internal, invisible. These are not conspiracy projections. They are published agendas, roadmaps from corporations and think tanks that outline a future where thought itself is regulated and human potential is algorithmically capped. The justification, convenience, safety, efficiency. But beneath the PR gloss is the core intention: containment. Because the greatest threat to the Matrix is not rebellion, it's expansion. Expanded consciousness cannot be monitored. It slips between frequencies. It rewrites its own reality. It reclaims memory, reactivates dormant potential, and disrupts predictive models. This is why, in every era of awakening, the system attempts to clamp down harder. We are entering such an era now. Huxley warned us long ago, experience is not what happens to you. It's what you do with what happens to you. That statement is more than philosophical. It is mechanical, because how you respond to these pressures, neurologically, emotionally, spiritually, literally determines the next layer of your timeline. To remain unconscious now is not merely to stagnate. It is to regress, to calcify within a system that no longer has the energetic capacity to sustain itself. The control grid is being held together by inertia, fear, and distraction, but not by truth. And in the absence of truth, even the most advanced simulation collapses. So let's address the neurological consequences of remaining in the Matrix. The overstimulation of synthetic dopamine loops from social media, addictive algorithms, and overstated narratives fragments attention. It depletes energy. It hijacks the reward centers of the brain and replaces depth with surface, presence with impulse. At a certain threshold, these loops burn out neural plasticity. Memory fades, focus dies. Identity becomes externally constructed rather than internally experienced. You become a reactive shell navigating a life not of your own making, but of your programming. This is not exaggeration. It is observable in brain scans, behavioral patterns, and cognitive decline trends rising among even the youngest generations. The psychological consequences are equally severe. An unconscious participant in the Matrix loses the ability to distinguish internal voice from external programming. Thought becomes echo. Emotion becomes simulation. What you believe to be yourself is often a composite of scripts, hashtags, and manufactured preferences. And the soul begins to suffocate. There's a reason ancient traditions emphasized initiation. Why mystery schools protected their teachings from the unprepared. Because consciousness, when denied its natural evolution, implodes. Depression, anxiety, despair. These are not malfunctions. They are signals of compression. Warnings that the soul is trapped in a system it was never designed to endure. Now, the spiritual consequences. When you consent to the matrix unconsciously, you submit to fragmentation. Your soul, which is multidimensional, eternal, and sovereign, gets reduced to data points, reactive tendencies, and survival-based decisions. You become energetically tethered to the artificial timeline. A loop without exit. A reincarnational recycling program based not on evolution, but entrapment. Every choice to ignore your awakening delays your return to source alignment. But there is still time. And that's the urgency behind this moment. The years ahead are not just important. They are volatile. Everything from geopolitical structures to economic systems to environmental balances is reaching critical instability. But beneath the chaos is the deeper crisis. The war for consciousness. This war is not fought with weapons. It's waged with signals, symbols, scripts, frequencies. And at its center is a singular goal: to keep you asleep, distracted, divided from yourself and from the unified field of awareness that can unravel the entire illusion. They know that if too many wake up at once, the game ends. That's why censorship is increasing. That's why narratives are tightening. That's why emotional triggers are being deployed with increasing precision. Not to inform you, but to overwhelm you. To short-circuit discernment, to keep the window of awakening sealed. But it can't hold, because critical mass doesn't require a majority. It only requires coherence, a field of fully aware, fully aligned beings who remember that they are not participants in the matrix, but architects of reality itself. And that remembrance is happening. People are breaking free from digital dependency, reconnecting with nature's rhythms, reclaiming ancestral practices, speaking in symbols, activating codes buried in sound, movement, breath. Not because they were taught, but because the soul remembers. You are part of that wave, or you wouldn't be hearing this. The choice is now, because neutrality is no longer an option. The simulation no longer permits passive participation. You are either feeding the system or breaking it. There is no middle path, and the tools you'll need have already been planted in your consciousness. Through dreams, through intuitions, through moments of unbearable clarity that shattered everything you thought you knew. Those were not accidents. They were activations. The real question is, what will you do with them? Because experience, as Huxley said, is not the event, it is the integration. And the integration of what you're learning now will determine not only your future, but the stability of the entire matrix field. The sixth revelation is final. The matrix system is not stable. It only survives by feeding on your unconscious engagement. Withdraw that engagement and the system begins to starve. Withdraw your belief and the simulation collapses. Withdraw your consent and the door appears. Now is not the time for sleep. It is the time for self-initiation, for realignment, for sovereign activation, and for the first time in generations, the veils are thin enough to step through. But only if you're ready to see what lies on the other side. It has been revealed. 6 major revelations, each peeling back a layer of deception, each pulling the curtain tighter to the edge, until all that remains is the naked machinery of a system desperate to sustain its illusion. Now that you've seen it, truly seen it, there is no returning to sleep. You know that the system doesn't just seek control over your environment. It seeks to inhabit your mind, to script your inner dialogue, to manufacture your emotional reactions, to curate your beliefs not from experience, but from algorithms, to render your perception into something programmable, malleable, and ultimately predictable. That is the essence of the matrix. And here, at the end of this transmission, it's time to reflect on the 6 revelations that have now become part of your awareness. First, you saw the signs of the matrix in your own life. The interruptions, the déjà vu glitches, the strange synchronicities. You learned how manufactured normalcy, driven by digital entertainment and social saturation, acts as a tranquilizer for your soul. The system doesn't just distract, it sedates. But beneath the silence, something within you was always watching, always waiting. Second, you uncovered the warnings of Aldous Huxley, who foresaw not only the mechanisms of control, but the specific methods through which consciousness would be chemically, culturally, and perceptually narrowed. His doors of perception were not poetic metaphors. They were technical descriptions of what the Matrix fears most: expanded awareness. Third, you were shown the architecture of the control grid, a 5-layered construct spanning sensory distortion, linguistic limitation, emotional manipulation, spiritual disconnection, and historical falsification. You understood that the prison is not built with walls, it's built with ideas, and its effectiveness depends entirely on your belief that the illusion is real. Fourth, you received the protocols of awakening, 7 techniques that were never taught in schools, never offered through official channels, because they threaten the very foundation of consensus reality. These were not motivational tools, they were access keys, timeless techniques encoded across cultures, designed to help the sovereign soul break free. Fifth, you examined the evidence hiding in plain sight: patents, documents, testimonies, artifacts of suppressed truth that would shatter the Matrix illusion if publicly understood. And you saw how media, education, and entertainment serve not to inform, but to obscure, distract, and reframe. Sixth, you learned that the Matrix is not stable. It does not exist through power, it exists through participation. Your unconscious attention is its energy source. Your passive consent is its permission slip. The moment you withdraw that energy and reclaim your sovereignty, the simulation begins to dissolve. This is not speculation. This is not theory. This is the structure of control and the path beyond it. And now, as the dust settles, a new question emerges. What do you do with this knowledge? This is where information becomes initiation. Too often, seekers of truth reach a point of understanding and stop. They believe that seeing through the illusion is enough. But sight without action is impotence. Insight without embodiment is inertia. The Matrix doesn't fear what you know. It fears what you do with what you know. So the first step is personal alignment. Truth must move from concept to nervous system. It must become a frequency you carry, not just a theory you ponder. That means tracking your responses, becoming aware of your triggers, disengaging from distractions not with force, but with clarity. Your focus is sacred. What you give it to determines your trajectory. The second step is inner recalibration. You've been programmed with limitation, but you were born encoded with multidimensional potential. Reactivate it. Use silence as a tuning fork. Use breath as a frequency tuner. Speak in ways that stretch your perception. Ask questions that rupture the script. Your subconscious will respond, and when it does, listen. The third step is external refinement. Surround yourself with people, symbols, and spaces that reflect the reality you are choosing, not the one that was chosen for you. The Matrix thrives on isolation, on artificial groupings created through digital filters. But true resonance is analog, biological, transcendent. Seek those who speak in energy, not algorithm. The fourth step is pattern recognition. Begin to see the loops, the emotional scripts, the historical cycles, and not just out there in you. Break the habits that reinforce your participation. Take back your mornings. Change your internal language. Interrupt your routine. These aren't productivity hacks, they are frequency shifts. Every time you disrupt your own loop, you weaken the Matrix's hold. The fifth step is conscious engagement. Don't just consume, create. Don't just awaken, activate. Speak the forbidden truths. Share the keys. Not with everyone, but with those who are ready. You will know them. They are already appearing. This video found you for a reason. and you are now part of a much larger algorithm, not the one that runs online, but the one that governs cosmic sequence. And the sixth step is remembrance. You are not just escaping a trap. You are returning to origin, to the you that existed before you were named, labeled, diagnosed, categorized. The real you, the sovereign, timeless, infinite field of awareness wearing a temporary mask. And the moment you remember that, the matrix loses its power. Now, before we close, I want to leave you with 3 immediate actions you can take right now, today, to begin shifting the trajectory of your consciousness. 1. Purge one input source. Choose a digital stream you regularly consume, news, entertainment, commentary, and cut it off. Not permanently, but symbolically. Reclaim that time. Use it to listen to your own thoughts without interference. Watch what arises. That silence will speak volumes. 2. Speak one forbidden truth. Not to the world, just to yourself. Say it aloud. The one thing you've been afraid to admit about your reality. Whether it's about the system, your life, or your past, name it. Language crystallizes consciousness, and when you speak truth, the matrix trembles. 3. Connect with one conscious mind. Not through likes, not through comments, but through resonance. Find someone who gets it. Speak in code if you must, but create that link. Because this awakening is not meant to be solitary. It is a collective algorithm. Each awakened mind strengthens the signal. You're not alone in this, and you never were. There are entire communities forming, off-grid, off-algorithm, beyond surveillance, where knowledge is preserved, truth is shared, and consciousness is cultivated. You are being invited, not by me but by your own intuition. Follow it. Before we close, one final echo from Aldous Huxley. A warning that grows louder with every passing year. Maybe this world is another planet's hell. He wasn't being poetic. He was being precise. Because what we call Earth has become, for many, a realm of forgetting. A domain where souls arrive encoded with greatness, only to be compressed by systems that feed on their amnesia. But you are reversing that. You are remembering, and that remembrance is contagious. So here it is, your final call to action. Awaken deliberately. Break the script. Speak what you see. Choose the unknown. Resist the lure of safety. And trust that your awareness, once expanded, cannot be put back in the cage. The doors of perception are yours to cleanse. And what you will see on the other side is not just a clearer version of reality, but your rightful place in it. You were never meant to adapt to the matrix. You were meant to override it. And now you will. You've seen what most never will. You've heard what few are ready for. But this is only the beginning. Everything shared with you so far has merely scratched the surface of what lies beyond the control grid. What comes next cannot be condensed into data streams or described in social terminology. It's a return to an ancient awareness, older than language, older than structure, older than the matrix itself. And what's coming will shatter everything. There's a frequency the controllers have tried to bury for centuries. Not destroy, because it cannot be destroyed, but distort, suppress, and mock. It's the frequency of liberated consciousness, and it's reactivating across the planet in silent, coordinated pulses. There is a key, a consciousness key, forgotten by most, hidden in plain sight, encoded into ancient technologies that were once used not for warfare or production, but for inner alignment. These aren't myths. They're operational tools, systems for personal ascension. Some call them meditative interfaces, others energy amplifiers, others sacred geometries in motion. But all of them point to the same truth. You are more than the body. You are more than the mind. You are a multidimensional node of awareness encoded with the blueprint of the cosmos itself. The next transmission will unlock this. The upcoming video is titled, The Consciousness Key, Ancient Technologies for Modern Liberation. And it's not a philosophical reflection. It's a tactical briefing. Inside, you'll discover technologies used in predigital societies to access heightened states of perception. tools designed to tune your neural oscillations, open dormant centers of cognition, and reconnect you to natural fields of intelligence long forgotten by institutional science. These are not inventions, they are remembrances. Stone resonators, breath-encoded languages, frequency maps hidden in architecture, cymatic patterns mirrored in sacred sites across the globe. The ancients weren't primitive, they were precise. And the reason their blueprints have been ridiculed and ignored is because they work. The Matrix cannot survive widespread access to these technologies. That's why they've been obscured, renamed, repackaged as mythology, or worse, weaponized. But in the next transmission, you'll see them decoded, piece by piece, and you'll receive the guide, the one that only circulates for a limited window of time. This isn't mass-distributed. It's not optimized for clicks or designed for viral traction. It's encrypted, private, and only revealed to those whose resonance matches the frequency. Inside the guide, you'll find a specific resonance techniques used by ancient cultures for energetic activation, a directory of sacred geometries and their psychological effects, real-world applications of multidimensional breathwork, energy field reprogramming sequences, and neural deconditioning exercises banned or suppressed in mainstream discourse. But access won't remain open. The moment it reaches a certain visibility threshold, the protocol will shut. Not by force, but by design. Because not everyone is ready to see the gears behind the veil. This isn't about gatekeeping. It's about energetic alignment. And that's why you're being invited to the private community transmission channel. This space is off-grid, off-index. It doesn't appear in search engines. It isn't linked in algorithms. It's the gathering point of those who've seen through the illusion and are now moving beyond it. Not in theory, but in practice. Inside, real-time conversations unfold. Techniques are shared, experiences decoded, symbols interpreted. Not in judgment, not in ego, but in reverence for what's awakening. If you feel the pull, follow it. The invitation is open, but only for now. Because this isn't about mass appeal. It's about signal clarity. And if you're still watching, it means your signal is strong enough. Now, before this video ends, there's one final question you must confront. It's not rhetorical. It's not philosophical. It's the key to everything. Was it random chance that brought you here? Or was this the first glitch in your matrix programming? Feel that. There's something deeper stirring beneath the surface of that question. A recognition. A sense that this moment isn't just content. It's contact. Not between personalities, but between timelines. Between the version of you who's still under the spell, and the version of you who has already awakened. And now they are merging. Everything that has led you to this point, every curiosity, every synchronicity, every strange sensation that reality itself was hollowing out, has converged into this single juncture. This is a crossing point, a dimensional overlap. And the choice is yours. You can return to the feed, back to the scroll, back to the lullaby of algorithms and opinions and distractions. Or you can listen to that still, sharp frequency rising inside you, because it's not done speaking. Your consciousness is no longer compatible with the old scripts, the old loops, the old identities. That discomfort you feel is not dysfunction, it's decompression. You're shedding the code, cracking the simulation from the inside out. The doors of perception are no longer theoretical. They are standing wide open. But no one can walk you through them. You must choose to step forward. So here's the final transmission. The matrix is glitching. The veils are thinning. The truth is rising. You are the frequency disruptor. You are the sovereign node. You are the algorithm breaker. And your very awareness is the virus in the system. They know it. You feel it. So now, watch this again. Take notes. Share the code. Speak the truth. Join the hidden transmission. Prepare for part 2. Because soon, very soon, this signal may disappear. But you won't forget. Not this time. Not anymore. You've remembered what you are. Now become it. Transmission ends.